Hello, welcome along. It's Children's BBC and a Hello, this is CBeebies.
Hello and welcome once again. Jack Hayward here with another Jack's Throwback Attack podcast. Hope you're keeping well. In this episode we have some excellent memories of kids TV from CBBC, CITV, Channel 4 Learning and CBeebies. So joining me for a chat today is someone who has been involved in kids TV since the early 90s, appearing on CBBC, CITV and CBeebies. It's Chris Jarvis. Hello.
Hello, Jack. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. It's good to have you on, finally. It's nice to be speaking to you, and I hope you're well.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, finally. I've had COVID, like a lot of people, but unlike some, I was very fortunate and didn't have bad symptoms, although it dragged on for quite a long time. But you're reminded, aren't you, daily, just how awful it has been for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you came out of it okay. As I mentioned you've been working in kids TV for a very long time. Now, was it always your ambition from a young age to be working in this field?
I'm not sure, really. That's a very good question. I certainly loved watching it when I was a kid. I grew up watching programs like Rent-A-Ghost and Rainbow and Playdays, and as well as all those wonderful half-hour sitcoms. So I think between all the television, I watched a lot of television. My parents were very conscientious because they were both in education. So, we ate good food, and kept a diary on holiday and all these sorts of things, and went to museums and did all these amazing things. But for some reason they did allow me to watch all this television, which was great, and most of it was highly inappropriate, especially things like Are You Being Served? But it made me fall in love with telly, and that's what I wanted to do. Working in children's television has been great because of the variety that you get to get involved with. So it's singing, dancing, jokes, drama. I've just been in Romeo and Juliet for CBeebies, but we also do Christmas shows where I've been a dame and all sorts of other things. So yeah, and in Show Me, which is like Play School, which is the show that I'm probably best known for. It's a whole variety of things, comedy sketches and songs, and so children's telly is great because you get to do everything. You get to do to be a jack of all trades.
Indeed, you do, and you have certainly done a lot of stuff over the years, which we'll go through. Now, the very first thing that you did in kids telly, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was the presentation links for Children's BBC. And how did that job come about?
Well, I sent in a show reel of me doing impression. I was an impressionist at the time, and I was working on the radio doing a kids show in Ipswich and also on LBC. I was doing stuff there, and so really, at that stage, I was really just sort of putting myself forward as a character actor. Didn't imagine that I would get a presenting job. Obviously, everyone dreams of getting jobs like that. But started off doing sort of character work and fell into presenting, really. I'm not really sure it's what I'm good at, because what I feel like do best is pantomime, and the bits of telly which are very much like pantomime, like Show Me, I tend to feel more confident and more at home doing. I don't think Chris Jarvis, the person, is very interesting. But when I become a larger than life character, like in pantomime, I can, I seem to have an easier ride. But no, it was a great privilege to do. Obviously, it's a dream job for a lot of people, and including myself. And what was lovely was all the people I worked with and got to meet, all the guests that came on the Broom Cupboard, but also on Fully Booked, which I did for a couple of years, we met a lot of interesting people. Some of them very famous and well known. All the pop groups, the Spice Girls, all the boy bands at the time, but also people like Nick Park and all these amazing writers and artists and people who work behind the scenes sometimes as well. So now that's really amazing. But for the last 20 years, I've been on CBeebies working with great people, but not really in the very show busy celebrity world.
Cool. And I mean, with the original stuff you did for Children's BBC, you did that for a very long time. I mean, there was obviously originally the Broom Cupboard, and later was it called TC9 or Studio 9? I seem to remember the bigger one. That was it, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
our first home, if you like, was the Broom Cupboard, was the presentation suite for BBC One, and sometimes we used the suite for BBC Two, like in the mornings. But it was all a bit Heath Robinson, really, because during the day there were ladies and gentlemen in there, not quite in their ball gowns and evening suits, saying in half an hour on BBC One we'll have Terry and June, all that sort of thing. And then for an hour and a half in the evening, suddenly lights came on. There was a camera bolted to the wall, and we did links for Children's BBC. But I think that was part of its charm, really. Sometimes you don't need to spend millions of pounds and have a big shiny floored studio. Sometimes in many ways it was like the beginning of YouTube, wasn't it? People sort of putting a camera on the wall and talking from their bedrooms. It was not much more than that. And so yeah, I did that for a while, and that was actually at Television Centre. We did get bigger as it became more popular. They moved studios. We took over the weather studio. So at the back of the area where BBC One and BBC Two comes from were two tiny studios that were always being used. One was actually designed for the weather forecast, but of course that all went digital, and for a long time they've been standing in front of computer generated screens with generated maps, whatever. But the other studio, so we took that studio over, and the other studio was for things like Points of View, Film 96, all those sort of programs. And so in the makeup room next door, we had Anne Robinson, who used to do Points of View, and Barry Norman, all these people. Even the old grey whistle test came from those studios. So they were busy. So there was a nice sort of atmosphere going on. And of course, downstairs, where you had the huge TC1 and 8 other huge studios, you had all the sitcoms, Parkinson, the Jonathan Ross Show. There was always queues of people waiting to go on Noel's house party or whatever, or queuing up to see a sitcom. It was a really exciting place to be, and it's such a shame it's gone. But times move on, and we're still making great television, and tastes change, and what people want. And the other thing that people forget is that in the early days of television, everything had to be shot in a television studio. It really doesn't have to be now. You can film television anywhere. The Aneiden Line, which was a drama all about boats and ships, was filmed. Most of it was filmed in a studio. They were telling me the gaffers who worked there that they actually built the ship, and the floor was sunk. TC1, the biggest studio, and TC3, the floors went down to reveal a huge pool where they could have boats and goodness knows what. Well, you don't do that. I mean, the idea of building a ship in a television studio now, people would cart you away, think you're absolutely out of your mind. I mean, much cheaper to film a real boat in the water out at sea, and that's how it's done. But no, I mean, it was exciting to be there with so much going on, and yeah, it did evolve. TC9 I think was the last home of CBBC before everything moved up to the north to Manchester.
I visited Television Centre about 8 years ago, not long before it shut, one of the tours, and that was exciting. Just thinking how many people had gone through those gates over the years. And you're right, it is a shame, but times do move on. Would you say that era of the BBC as a whole, but Children's BBC as well, was something of a golden era?
I think we go through different periods. You know, I regularly get asked to go on BBC local radio, it seems quite a lot, to talk about, children's television, and people phone in and say, oh, it's much better when I was younger. We had Mary Mungo and Midge and all this. And you think, are you mad? You know, watch them on YouTube. You know, yeah, they were good programs, but compare it to Hey Dougie and Postman Pat and The Moon and Me and the amazing programs that we have out now. The technology is different now, so children's TV benefits from that. And there were some great programs. Of course, there were. I loved Rent-A-Ghost, as I said earlier, and there were some brilliant animations like the Chigley Trumpton. Even now, if you watch them on YouTube, they still stand up as great bits of telly. And but it wasn't all good. It wasn't all good, and you know, especially the things I was in, they were rubbish. But you know, things have got better, not least because we now have 2 channels on the BBC alone. There are 36 children's channels just in this country. Nickelodeon, cartoon, and all that competition and choice means that kids, well, in the first instance, the people making the programs can't make rubbish anymore. You can't serve up things just on a whim. You've got to do your research, make sure that you're making something that children are going to enjoy. Otherwise, they won't watch it, and you'd have wasted a lot of money, because it costs tens of thousands of pounds to make TV programs for children, or for anyone for that matter, of any quality. So yeah, there have been golden eras. I mean, when I was watching children's television, everything was so new. So of course it was really like the days of pirate radio were for rock and roll radio. So too was that beginning of children's television, where they were coming up with great animations and dramas like Grange Hill, and comedies like Rent-A-Ghost. Keep going on about it, but it was good. And Words of Gummidge. There were others, but you know, it was a bit of a golden era, and because it was all so fresh. But I think what children have now is a lot more of it, a lot more choice, and they also have the benefits of those old programs, because even though they're not shown anymore, the people who worked on them once have passed on the wisdom, and in many cases are still working there. You know, there are people who worked on Play School still making children's television today. And of course, they bring to the team, which could be made up of a lot of younger people, but nevertheless, they bring to the team all that experience, all that talent, and so that people learn from what went before and can build on it. So in many ways, I think we're in a better place. The other thing, of course, is that our competition on the BBC used to be ITV. Now it's all these other channels, but it's also Pixar movies. In most homes with young families, they have a whole stack of DVDs. At any point, the kid can go, I want Lion King, and they can have Lion King, or they can watch a game, or play a game rather, on a tablet or phone or whatever. So they have a lot more choice. So I guess this is a golden era.
Yes, very true. I like your answer. Everybody thinks that their era is the golden era. I always say, you know, the time that I grew up was special, because it was the last kind of era where kids' television was just an hour and a half on the terrestrial channels. The digital channels were about, but they were still in their infancy. You know, there wasn't 24-hour viewing, so it was very different. You had to watch it at that time, and if you didn't, then you missed it, unless you taped it on VHS. So yeah, it has changed.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you. And what you're saying is what I've always said about what's really sad about what's happened with television generally, is that it's no longer such an event. And you don't have that sort of playground or even an office conversation the next day about, did you watch last night this wonderful program, ... Now, you know, it's not a problem if you have missed it, but the chances are you won't even have heard of it. And it, you know, it took me years to actually get around to watching Game of Thrones, you know, so everybody going on about that for ages. But back then, people all watched it. I remember at school, we watched Grange Hill, and the next day we were all talking about it, or whatever it was, whatever else was on television. So I agree with you, that sense of event, that specialness of children's television, and also the fact that everybody knew who people were. I mean, I get recognized more in the street for stuff I did in the 90s than I have done for the last 20 years, because in those days, people were waiting for Neighbours to come on, but there were only 5 channels anyway, really, for a lot of people. So, we were very lucky, and that gets me pantomime every year. But yeah, I take your point, and you are right. That sense of event, but I think that's a general sadness for the whole of television. The fact that people don't all watch the same thing anymore, and it's one of the reasons why I stopped doing impressions. I mean, I do because I do them. I use different character voices for stories and storytelling, and occasionally in pantomime. But the fact that not everybody knows who various people are from sitcoms. But going back to the 70s and 80s, if you did an impression of, I don't know, Del Boy, everyone knew who Del Boy was and how he sounded.
Yes, indeed. And I think the other thing as well is, like you say, it is a golden era in some senses, these days. I mean, I've not watched children's television for a long time, so I can't really comment on it. But I think the one thing that's nice with CBeebies now and CBeebies is they're both still committed to making their own content, and they put a lot of time and effort into it. The thing that you get now, because there's so many channels, you get quite a few that just have a lot of very cheap and cheerful stuff and a lot of imports and a lot of CGI. And I think that's a bit of a shame. I think it's a shame that there's not that much that doesn't use that, but it seems that those two channels still follow the old school, I suppose. I don't know if you know what I mean.
Absolutely right. And I think if they ever did go down the path of trying to compete with some of the successful cartoon channels like Nickelodeon and Disney and Cartoon Network by putting on more cartoons and animation, I think they'd be in trouble, because even if they managed to boost the audience, I think the audience itself would not be unhappy. It's a bit like, if you were to go into a restaurant that you loved and every time you went in there, you were just served chips, because as much as you love chips and fish and fried food, you don't want to have it every day, even though it's probably tasty and your favorite meal. Sometimes you need a salad. And I think that CBeebies has a great diet of animation, live action, and it does its live action very well. I'm not just saying it because I'm on it, but show me, it's not just me. Of course, there's, for every presenter on a program, there's about 40 people behind the scenes making it work, and it's those people, it's the thought, the imagination, the scripts, the sets, the camera work, everything that goes into making live action fantastic. And I think that children would be culturally very worse off if you didn't have CBBC and CBeebies, and it would be a crying shame if they are defunded anymore. And it's a shame people can't, some people can't see the value in it, and I think that's really, really sad, because it can't be starved anymore. Really, it's kind of probably operating as I don't know, as frugally as it. I mean, it's such an efficient operation. It's incredible the way it works. But no, I think moving forward that the BBC has its niche, as you say. It's doing a lot of live action. There are lots of people, real human beings, and that interaction between the child and a human is so important.
Yes, indeed, and hopefully it continues for many more years. It would be a great shame if it did stop. So I want to ask just a couple more questions about kind of the 90s days before we kind of move on to later on. Now, like you say, you did a lot of characters and a lot of voices and stuff like that. And one of the characters that you did a lot of in those days was the Anorak, which I know is very popular. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, the character itself, I did on the radio a long time ago, 1988. I'm very old. And the character name was a term that was used by the Radio Caroline DJs back in the 60s. In fact, the term was invented by my first producer, who was called Andy Archer, who was a DJ on Radio Caroline. And that's what they used to describe the people who went over to the ship in dinghies, because they were obsessed with pirate radio. And they called them the Anoraks because they were wearing anoraks. So we already had that character, and he was just a bit of a foil for me on air, because it was just me doing silly voices and goodness knows what. So the character was there, and we went through a period in the 90s after Ed the Duck of not having a puppet for a while, and they just wanted to rest the idea of having a puppet before they brought in a new one. And they came up with the amazing Otis the Aardvark, who's sensational. But it was good to have a little bit of a break, and I filled in that break really. I just gave Toby a bit of a foil, and he was an anti-hero. He was really a pantomime baddie, which is quite an easy way out really. It wasn't very sophisticated and actually not very good because we were just making it up as we went along, but it served a purpose and it generated mail, and that's what you need when you're on the radio and you've got a lot of airtime or you're doing those sort of jobs. And I think Toby was absolutely brilliant. He was one of the most skilled at it, of being able to make everything exciting and in a very genuine way, but he needed a foil almost to give him that material if he needed it. And of course the having the Anorak generating all this terrible mail just gave him fodder to entertain the kids. And he was very, very good at it. I often thought with Toby whether he'd ever find another job that was 100% him, and he has, because he's on Heart now, presenting Heart Dance, and he does it with the same enthusiasm, but it's completely different, obviously, character and work ethic. But that job is also 100% him. It makes me wonder what else he could do. But no, I haven't seen him for ages, but we do stay in touch.
Good stuff. It's nice to hear that, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. And one of the shows that you presented around that time as well was the fantastic Playdays. What was it like presenting that, and was that your first foray into presenting for a preschool audience, something that you'd go on to do a lot more later on?
Yeah, it was. And I think it was the first time I realized, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten just how many things go into making a preschool program, as in storytelling, music, dance, mime, just general entertainment, comedy, characters. I mean, it's brilliant. Preschool television for someone like me, who's a bit of a variety turn, is fantastic. But it was also a bit of a wake up call to the fact that actually it's really difficult, and it's its own science. It's there are people who just work in preschool television who are very different to the people who work in CBBC. It's its own little area. Because it's a mixture of entertainment and education, which I found very exciting. Because, to be honest, I was actually not, I didn't dislike working on children's BBC at all. I loved it, but I was sort of hankering for something with a little bit more, I don't know, brains to it, and I think that you do get tested a little bit more working in preschool television, because you have to be so mindful of the fact that your audience have no field of references. You can't just say, this thing, da da da. You can't. You just have to assume they don't know anything, because you're entertaining children as young as 2 as well as children of 6 and 7. It's a really incredible age group if you think about it, because there's a massive difference between a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, whereas there isn't such a big difference between the upper ages. So yeah, no, I love the challenge, and sort of fell in love with that way of working, really.
Great, yeah, it was a good show, ran for many years, and still fondly remembered to this day.
There were a lot of people who did it incredibly well, who I think are missing now, but it's impossible, I guess, to employ everybody that, you accumulate over time. But there were some really, really good presenters. And also, of course, the puppetry that was on there. They were absolutely loved, the 3 key puppets, but there were others as well. There was so much to that series. It was very, very successful.
It was indeed, and it holds very happy memories for myself and many people. And I guess,
What's your favourite stop, Jack?
do you know what? My memory's really terrible on what they were.
Round stop, the roundabout stop, the Poppy stop, which I
Yes.
love. It was such a long time ago, but Sue Monroe, who did Poppy, is a good friend, and we ended up working together in CBeebies, because she became a presenter. You see, she was Poppy the cat,
Yes.
for many years, and she became a presenter, one of the very first presenters on CBeebies.
Oh yes, yes, yes. I remember now. Yes. I think the one that sticks in my mind the most. I mean, you did more of the outdoor ones than the indoor ones. I seem to remember. I don't know if I'm
Yeah,
misremembering.
I only did a few, really, 13, I think, maybe,
Oh, okay.
but but they were repeated a lot. It's like Show Me. We've made hundreds of episodes of that, and but that's shown every day at different. Well, they're resting it at the minute. They go through periods of resting programs, otherwise it drives parents up the wall. But earworms galore. But with Playdays, yeah, there did seem to be a few more repeats, and of course they were in a little bit of hiatus when just before the Teletubbies came out, because I think they knew that they were finishing, and yet still having to make programs, which must be awful experience.
I think the one that sticks in my memory the most is the roundabout stop, only because of that song, Roll Up and Ride on Rosie, that one. The one with Mr. Jolly.
Yes. Dun, 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 with Mr. Jolly. And there were several Mr. Jollies, so everyone has a favourite Mr. Jolly.
Yes, indeed. Another legendary show that you appeared on, and do you know what? I actually forgot until somebody pointed it out to me last night. I was mentioned that I was speaking to you. You made an appearance on Chuckle Vision at one point, and playing a posh footman, and they come to hang up a tapestry, I seem to remember, and they just wreak havoc. That looked like a good laugh.
Oh, they were great. The Chuckle Brothers were brilliant because they were incredibly successful, not just in terms of what they were doing on children's TV, but in the theatres as well. And they've been doing it for a very, very long time. And so we all looked up to them. They were like the senior performers on children's TV. And when we did the Big Bash pantos, because we did 4 pantos in the NEC. Do you remember those, where we took over a massive hall? So one whole hall was used for exhibitions and children's TV programs, but then we took over another hall at the NEC, which they turned into a massive theatre. It was a 3,000-seater theatre. Huge. I mean, unbelievable, with kudos sets, and we put on pantos every year. And we did 5 performances a day. Oh, it nearly finished some people off, but the Chucks turned up in their Winnebago and parked it inside the hall, just behind the stage. So, we were very lucky because they used to invite us in for a cup of tea or whatever into their Winnebago. Oh, they were really nice guys. And of course, you learn your craft from people like that. When you share a stage with somebody like Paul or Barry Chuckle, and you watch them in action every day, 6 or 7 times in a row, with all the rehearsals and everything, you learn so much, not just how to do it, but the ethos, everything. They were great, and it was great to go on their program. I haven't forgotten some of the tips and advice they gave me, actually.
Yes, and you played the role very well, getting quite annoyed with them over the course of the episode.
It's very hard when they're trying to make you laugh all the time.
Yes. I think what's great is that I've never heard or read a bad word about them. And I went to see their show in 2014. A friend of mine had bought me tickets as a surprise, despite the fact that we were both far too old by this point. I think I was about 20. Yeah. And we loved it. And we went and had photos with them after, and they waited for everybody was had a photo and signed everything. I think my friend bought about 5 or 6 key rings and asked for every single one to be signed. I had my program signed, and then we waited. My friend said, let's wait outside and see if we catch them again, and we did, and we waved to them, and then their other brothers who played the other characters, the no slacking one and get out of it. They come out and we had photos with them, and it was great. I remember I was smiling ear to ear, and it turned out sadly to be their last tour. In the end, after that they kind of stopped doing the tours, because I think by that point Chuckle Vision had been off for a few years, so I guess the audiences were starting to dwindle down, and then they just stuck to panto. And then unfortunately we lost Barry a few years ago, which was just terrible. But yeah, what a great legacy, and that program was just fantastic. And how many episodes they did? Oh my god, 20 odd years.
Yeah. But there's a new double act on CBeebies, Danny and Mick. And Danny Adams and Mick, they're actually real life brothers, but I think step brothers. But they've been in the pantos in Newcastle for years. I think this must be the 14th or 15th year of them in this panto, and they are the stars of it. And it's really interesting because they've sort of done what the Chucks did in reverse. Although the Chucks were successful in theatre before they went on television, but they've been touring a show, Circus of Humor or something, for a long time, as well as these pantos, and they now have this program, and it's very reminiscent of the Chuckle Brothers because there's a lot of slosh and there's a lot of slapstick comedy, and they're brilliant. They're dynamite.
Great, I have heard of them. Yeah, it's nice. I guess it's like passing the baton on, really. You know.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years' time they'll be touring in the same way that the Chucks always toured, a version of their TV program, or parodying. They did Chuckle Potter, didn't they? Which we didn't get to see that, and they normally Pirates of the Chuckle Vision or something. But no, Danny and Mick are really carrying that on, which is good.
Absolutely. So moving on from the CBBC days, there was like a middle period between that and CBeebies where you did some stuff for CITV and Channel 4. One of the shows I really want to talk about is Jungle Run. You were the host, you were the second person to host it for 2 series. How did you land that job, and what was your experience of it?
I auditioned to be the host, and they auditioned about 8 people, 8 different presenters with children, and they let the children decide. So I was very fortunate to have been picked, because, and I actually felt that show and that audition process was probably the most credible out of all of them, because before it was people deciding for the children, whereas this one was the children making up their own mind. So I was enormously flattered. Unfortunately, the children that were there at that audition later went on to one of the episodes, and they won, but something went wrong with the timer or something, and it left a really bad taste in my mouth, actually, because I don't know what happened. There was some sort of confusion, but I believe they did win, or there was some discrepancy, and I was powerless to do anything about it. It was actually quite awful, but I couldn't get involved because, I didn't know. I was presenting it. I was in the game. I didn't have the stopwatch in front of me. There was nothing I could do, but it was all very odd, and I'm not quite sure how it was resolved and what happened. But apart from that incident, it was the most incredible show to be on. I mean, the set was incredible. It was we filmed it in a disused RAF hangar, massive hangar, absolutely huge, near Nottingham, and the set was possibly more impressive in real life than it looks on telly, because I think it's almost impossible to capture, even on very wide angle lenses, the enormity and the spectacle of that set. It cost millions to make, absolute millions. It really was phenomenal, and it was at a point, as you say, just at the turn of the millennium, when ITV had a lot of money for children's programs, and they did it incredibly well. It was every bit as good as the BBC at that point, and the investment was every bit as good as the BBC, and in many ways every bit as good as a movie, because that's what it felt like. It felt like being in a movie, or certainly on a movie set. There's some incredible games. Even I couldn't work out how they were working. I mean, just brilliant. And the people were so talented. The producers, the directors, the researchers who found these amazing kids to go on there, because they really did their research well. And it wasn't just what you saw, it was everything that went on before. And then, of course, the music and the edit and everything. So yeah, it was a great privilege to be on, and very hard to say goodbye to. But I had to leave because that's when CBeebies started. So I left it to go off and film shows in fact, as soon as I finished the second series, I went to Wales to film Step Inside, which was a storytelling program, which was one of the first programs on CBeebies. So as well as presenting CBeebies, I was on programs on it. So yeah, that's how that worked out.
Great. Yeah, I love that show so much. And I recently interviewed Michael Underwood, who took over from yourself on the show, and he said that, the same thing, the set was just something else. And what you saw on telly was pretty much how it was laid out on the map. Everything was actually where it was, and, it was actually there. Like, my favourite game was the pyramid, where you went in
Yeah.
the hole at the top and you had that maze underground. That looked fantastic, that did, on
It
screen.
was absolutely incredible. And I agree with you. That was my favorite game as well, because I think it's the game that most children at home would have thought, wow. And it just played on everything that kids love: secret tunnels, solving problems. And of course, those children had to really work hard together because they were using walkie talkies. You had one child going through secret tunnels in a pyramid, while the children up, I think I've got this right from memory, while the other two were upstairs trying to solve a puzzle and communicating with the child in the tunnel via walkie-talkies, making doors open, secret doors open. So you had a whole team of people inside the set, inside the pyramid, making those trap doors open so that the child inside could wriggle through. It really was quite incredible and very impressive to watch.
Indeed, as well as the temple bit at the end, that was just so exciting. And you know what? Even to this day, watching some of them back, it's like it's now biting stuff. You are really rooting. And when there was that gong that said you've got 20 seconds to get
Yeah,
out, and you've got to
yeah.
leg it from the end room. Some of it was pretty close to the knuckle. I could just
I didn't
remember.
appreciate. Yeah, you're right. You're right. The drama and the skill. Well, the skill that went into coming up with all the games in the first instance, but then the skills and the talent that was there making it all happen, I didn't really appreciate at the time, because only since then have I been more involved in behind the scenes stuff. So I write programs now, and I've toured a show, and I've had to come up with stuff. And when you actually start doing all the logistical, so I mean, I've always directed pantomimes, but television is something else, and the enormity of the task of making all that happen, it's just mind-boggling, really. And they did it. And there were some very clever people. There were some really good people working on it when I did it. But then the following year, which Michael did, they brought in another director, Martin Day, who's a good friend of mine, who brought even more to the program, including live animals. So you'll notice there were real snakes wriggling around, which I don't think were in any of the ones that I did or Dom did,
Yes, I remember. Yeah, they did put animals in.
which I thought was a really good touch. Made
Yeah.
it feel even more real. And yeah,
Yeah.
very clever.
What I find funny as well, watching it back, is how frustrated you got with some of the contestants. Like you do get quite wound up at times. I don't know if that was part of the act or because you
Oh
have to
yeah.
kind of play like a stern character. I thought it was funny.
Well, there were three kids. I remember them. I can still see them in my mind, who were hopeless. And to be fair, and they had such a good sense of humor. They knew they were hopeless, and we just got on really well, and we were laughing all the time. It's a shame, because the program is only 20 minutes long, and really they have to cut out so much stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and in between the games. And but they were hysterical. They came out with some real gold. Really, really funny. And yeah, but that would have been me. I'd have been one of those. I would have been hopeless at it. But it was interesting, because we had children on the program who are 10, and we sometimes had children on the program who were about 12. And what was really interesting, Jack, is some of the games you'd say, right, okay, what you got to do, you got to climb up onto that rope, and you've got to shin across that rock, and then jump up onto that ledge, and then swing across the water. All right, and then now a 10-year-old would go, yeah, okay, and then they go and do it, and they try and do it. Whereas a 12-year-old goes, I'm not doing that. No, honestly, you can. No, I'm not. There's no way I'm going to. I might fall off. And it's really the difference between a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old hadn't really occurred to me before.
No, very true, very true. But looking back now as an adult, I'm very jealous of anybody who went on it, and I'm sure a lot of people are too. Um,
It's funny because because they still show it. Well, maybe they don't anymore, but they were until quite recently. And I've had kids come up to me and say, "Oh, how do I get on?"
mm,
And I find that very interesting that they still think that it's happening and it was
Yes.
20 years ago. But I guess it's not until you get to the prize. Here you go, you've won a CD player, and we hold over something that looks like it could have been, in the TARDIS in the 60s. But no, it sort of still works actually as a program. I think it's a shame they don't show it because it has stopped. But yeah, when you've spent that much money on the set, you kind of want to get your money's back, surely.
Yes, I've seen many comments down the years and memes about the prizes, and to be fun, it's funny actually. Just before I travelled up here to do this interview, somebody's actually done a video compiling some of your comments on the show. Some of the times when you get a little bit wound up with people. I don't know who spends time making these things, but I think one of the comments that made me laugh was somebody was climbing along one of the ledges on the waterfall, but being very slow, and he said something like, "You're not in a bathroom, you're not taking a shower, just jump." Which I thought was funny.
It was, do you know what? It was such fun to do. And it was one of those programs which is quite honest, really, in that what you see is what happened, and there's no way around it. Whereas a lot of TV that I've been involved in, we stop and start, and we spend a lot of time getting everything absolutely right. But it was enormous fun being part of a program which was so in your face and had real tension. It had real drama to it, and I hope they make more things like that. I think they made something similar recently on ITV. I've got a feeling somebody.
It's called "Don't Unleash the Beast" or something like that. It does look very Jungle-unlike.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's a gift of a format, and we're a little bit sick of panel shows and a bit bored of them now.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Crystal Maze has come back, which is great. Which I'm guessing gave a little bit of inspiration to Jungle Run.
It did. I'm a big fan of both, and there is definitely some inspiration there. One question I do have that's been stuck in my mind, because I mentioned that you played like quite a stern character, very serious. One of the things I've noticed, and I've just always been curious as to whether it was real or not, is you had a snake tattoo on your arm. was that fake, or was it real?
Did I really? I don't remember that.
Yes, I noticed it watching it back once. I'm like, oh my God, he's got a snake tattoo on his inner arm. But I'm guessing it was part of the costume.
Yeah, it was. Jeepers, I don't remember. That's really worrying that I can't remember.
I just thought I'd ask. Another CITV show you did, and I forgot until recently, The Fantastic Dream Street, but that was a voice role, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. So that was great fun to be part of, because it was done with so much heart. A bit like Jungle Run. The people behind the scenes, a guy called Nigel Stone and his team, and there was a director, I can't remember his name, but he worked on big movies, and it was all shot at Pinewood. And the heart that went into it. It's a shame because I think they brought it back again recently. They remastered it and put it out, but it deserved to do so much better than it did because of the work that they'd put in, and it was beautifully shot, really clever. And Russ Abbott did the narration, and I thought did a really good job of it because he's quite a warm comic, and obviously being a father as well, and he's probably a grandfather now, but he just had struck the right tone.
Indeed, yes, and it was a great show. I remember watching it.
I'm actually looking at a model of Hot Rodney right now.
Oh, okay.
He's sat on top of a speaker. Hot Rodney, who was great fun to do because he was a bully and he wasn't very nice, but I made him very silly. I used a lot of, it was like a cross between Bruce Forsyth and a great comic called Ken Campbell, who I really adored. I thought he's very, very funny. So it was a really good sort of reference, really, for making him silly rather than evil.
Yeah, no, it was a good show, and yeah, I do think they did kind of revive it some years later. Yeah, I do think I think they did that. Yeah, another voice role as well, but this was on ITV rather than CITV, and I'm a big fan of game shows as well. You did the voiceover on Catchphrase for a bit, and you'd often do quite humorous remarks about Nick Weir at the start of every show. Did you have a good camaraderie with him?
Yeah, those were all scripted, so I can't claim any credit for that at all. And I have to say, hats off to him for sort of green lighting it and wanting that to happen. But I guess yeah, I don't remember too much about it. It was such a long time ago. But somebody said, oh, they'd heard me on Challenge TV. So I guess they're showing them all again.
Yeah.
But no, he's a really, he now runs cruise lines. He does all the entertainment. I can't remember the name of the cruise line, but if you find Nick Weir on Twitter, you can see all the incredible shows he puts on. And I mean, they're absolutely jaw-droppingly incredible, these shows, using the latest technology. Obviously, they've got a lot of money on these huge cruise liners, but no, that's what he's up to now.
Great. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, and in fact, I'm sure I've seen him on a program in the last 2 or 3 years where it was like looking back at game shows, because obviously he had that moment where he broke his leg on one of his first shows, but he still carried on and did the
Yeah,
series.
a bit like Matthew Kelly did on Game for a Laugh a few years before. But yeah, I think it just adds to the drama of what's going on, doesn't it? To see your heroes in a little bit of peril. But yeah, life goes on, doesn't it? Just because you've broken your foot or whatever, you've still got to do your job.
Indeed, indeed. And before we move on to the CBeebies stuff, there's one show you did for Channel 4 that I remember, and it was Maths Mansion, where you played Sad Man and Bad Man. This is bad maths.
Bad maths. It was in the early days of Big Brother, and the guy who came up with it, two guys, Roland and Chris, ran a company, Open Mind, and Chris, I think, had worked with a lot of alternative comedians and had written episodes of The Young Ones and was really very, very funny, and had then opened this educational production house, really. But by combining comedy and all the skills that he got from working on all those programs and The Young Ones with maths and hard GCSE syllabus or key stage 2 maths or whatever it was we were doing, shows how much I know about maths. He managed to forge this wonderful program, and it was a real gift because I played this sort of was like a male version of Anne Robinson in Weakest Link, and this really nerdy open university character. So these two characters who hated each other, both of them played by me, hosted this show, and it turned out right at the end that they were actually father and son.
Oh, I didn't
Which
know
was
that.
really sweet. Yeah, really weird. Really weird. And but that was great fun to do because we were in a house on the Thames. It's called Doyley Cart House. That's where it was filmed. This really decrepit mansion that's only used for filming now. And they created Maths Mansion, this rather ghostly mansion where children were trapped and couldn't leave until they'd collected enough cards, which were basically they were given as rewards if they managed to complete their maths. But and those kids were great because they were actors in the show. They weren't real contestants, and they had to learn all this stuff. And of course, maths is really hard anyway. Well, I think it is. And when you're in a game show situation, because there was a game show element to it, as well as this sort of Big Brother element, they were really on the spot. It was really hard I really felt for them because not only did they have to remember their lines, they had to remember the sense of what they were saying. It wasn't just like learning lines. You were having to learn numbers and fractions, and it was really complicated for them. I had it easy. I mean, I may have even had the words in front of me because I was being the question master, but it was a real tough call on them, and they were brilliant. I hope they're all doing well, and some of them, I can't remember their names, but they were, because it was such a long time ago, but they were all tremendous to have taken that challenge and risen to it.
Indeed, and hats off to him for. I couldn't do that. I'm terrible at maths, so learning lines as well.
Had to learn it all again. It was like, oh my god, I thought the only great thing about being an adult is you don't have to do any more maths. I get a job hosting a maths show, but it was just the comedy made up for it. And I think that it hopefully helped because it's being relicensed. So you teachers can get it, and I get a lot of correspondence about the program. So Channel 4 are selling it to schools. You can buy it as a set, and I've had a lot of calls and emails and tweet messages or whatever from teachers and kids who are watching it now and saying that it really helps them. And I think, yeah, actually, I mean, it sounds a bit naff, make maths fun, but no, make it fun. Why not? Why not make it fun? Why not make it entertaining? You're more likely to learn it. There was I took, you were talking about the golden age of television
Yeah.
earlier on, and everyone thinks that they had a golden age. Well, in many ways, since they created these two channels, it has been a golden age ever since, because now things like Dick and Dom, which was the first Saturday morning program on the new CBeebies, that was just for children. Before then, the Saturday morning programs had always been trying to entertain adults and students as well. So it was great that we had this new way of doing things. Everything that you see now on CBBC and CBeebies is just for kids. There is nothing on there that has adults in mind. It might be, there might be the odd CBeebies special Christmas show that is made palatable for the grown-ups who watch it with them at Christmas time or whatever. But really, it's all for the children. And I think that's tremendous and a real achievement that's happened over the last 20 years since we had those channels. But talking about making learning fun, there was a program with Jedward, who I didn't really warm to initially, but they hosted a program, I can't remember the name of it, on CBBC, where they took each Jedward, each twin, took a team of kids to a place of learning, to a museum or something, and it would be one Jedward and an expert. And the expert and Jedward character would try and teach these kids different bits of information. Well, the expert would drone on about whatever it was in this museum. Meanwhile, the Jedward person would be silly, larking around, giving bits of information, but, doing a somersault or cracking a joke. At the end of it, there was a test to see, how many questions and how much, these two teams could remember. Well, nearly everything that these teams were remembering, the children remember, was from the Jedward's mouth, not the experts. Proof again that actually it's the packaging and how you sell it. And television generally doesn't really excel at informing, but what it does do, it creates these sort of a romantic attachment to things. You can't learn how to play the piano by watching television, but by watching somebody play the piano beautifully makes you fall in love with the idea of playing the piano and makes you want to do it, and makes you realize that there's a sense to all the practice that you have to put in, and I think that's what children's television is all about.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you there.
Such a good program, that Jedward thing, by the way. I wish I could remember what it's called, but you'll find it. You just put Jedward Children's TV. It's really funny. I wasn't expecting to I had to watch it for BAFTA, and I was dreading it, and I was so surprised. It was so funny and so brilliantly done, and the two of them were really good at it. And I know they get a lot of bad press, but they were exceptional at presenting for children.
Great stuff. Well, we move on now to CBeebies, which has been going strong since 2002, and you've been a part of it pretty much since day one. Tell us about how that all came about and started, and everything that you've done really in that time.
Well, I mean, I was invited to be one of the hosts. So for the first 8 years, after launching it with Poi, we were there doing a sort of a live play school, Playdays, whatever you want to call it. So we were there between the shows. And in the early days, there wasn't a lot of money. There weren't that many programs in the arsenal. Well, it wasn't the case that there wasn't much money. There just wasn't enough stuff. So what we were doing live every day was really important, because it created, a sense of newness and gave it a sense of connection to the children watching, on a day-to-day basis. We did birthdays, all sorts of stuff that chimed with whatever was going on in the world at that moment that might be appropriate for little kids. After that, we went on to do Show Me So we did 8 years of prayers. Then we went into Show Me, and we've been doing that with the last series we did in 2016, and since then we've been doing stargazing and other shows and bits and bobs. But of course, once you make a program like Show Me, it's there. It's stargazing doesn't really get repeated that much, but Show Me does, because the way television is made now really is that they tend to make less better. So you put more money into the execution of the programs, you make it more epic, and then you can play it many more times. And also, and that's because, you know, we're up against movies and everything else that exists out there that children can access with just one swipe of their finger. So yeah, but it was a huge opportunity. And the other thing is, when CBB started, we really didn't know how big it was going to become. We didn't realize how enormous CBeebies would become and how important it would become, because before then, children's television for preschoolers was just half an hour on BBC Two at 10 o'clock or whenever it was, and it was part of people's day. CBeebies went. It's 13 hours a day, but you know, from the moment the children wake up until they go to bed at 7 o'clock, CBeebies is there. You know, it was almost like TV creche was invented that didn't exist before. So we became part of people's routine, and like radio, people love CBeebies. They might not love BBC One, but they love CBeebies. They love the whole idea of it. The other thing we didn't realize at the time, even when it became successful, was that it would stay successful. And now, with a whole new generation of people coming, it just seems to get bolder, and they're doing Shakespeare, ballet, concerts, the proms. There've been 3 proms. The ambition of CBeebies just seems to get bolder and bolder, and I think people appreciate that. And going back to what you were saying earlier on, having people presenting to children rather than cartoons and making that connection is so important, at the heart of everything that we still do.
Absolutely, yes. And I also think the same for the continuity links. It's so much better when it's a person there rather than just a voice. And one thing I have noticed is that in those 20 years, CBBC has gone through many changes, many facelifts, whereas CBeebies has still stuck to the same yellow logo and those yellow blobs. At the time of when they both launched, you had the green blobs on CBBC, the yellow ones on CBeebies. CBeebies have stuck to that, but CBBC has changed quite a lot, which I have noticed.
Yes, I think that's another amazing thing about CBeebies. It hasn't changed its identity at all. It's still, as you say, exactly the same as it was when it launched in 2002. Whereas CBBC, I guess because it's older children and they need to match fashions at the time. And they also, the other problem that CBBC have got, they need to stay distinctive, and they need to have a distinction between CBBC and all the other children's TV channels at any one particular time. So they do need to stay on top of what's on trend. But so they have a tougher job. CBBC is a much tougher channel to run, I think.
Yes, and with Show Me, was that? Because I know you created that with Poya, and you presented it together, and you've been friends for many years, which is fantastic. Was Show Me created as kind of a follow-on of those shows like Play School and Playdays?
Yes, kind of. Yes, I mean we did. We there was nothing on at the time for that particular. Well, there was, but you know, not targeting that particular age group, the younger end of the audience in terms of live action. So yes, the idea was to create the great grandson of Play School that worked a little bit like Tickabilla and Playdays. Yeah, it was that same sort of idea, but we wanted to add more character, a bit more, not necessarily comedy, but that sort of sitcom conversation. So as well as of us talking to the children, we talk to each other, you know, and we would play. And the idea was for children to play along at home. And we always say at the beginning of it, we have our toys. So we have 5 toys, a bit like with Play School, Big Ted, Jemima, and everything. And the intention that remains to this day is that we don't ever sell those toys. You will never ever be able to buy them. You can buy bootleg versions of Stuffy and Miss Mouse on eBay that people have made, and that's great because they're all homemade and they're all different, and they'll never be as the same as the ones on the telly. But the idea is find your own. So you get your own character toy or teddy bear or whatever it might be, or doll, and join in with the show. But so there was the idea of playing along and also watching humans interact on screen and playing, and so that you're encouraging people to join in with that imaginative play that has always been a tradition of BBC and British preschool TV.
Good stuff. And long may it continue. Also, you and Poya were also responsible for Old Jack's Boat, weren't you, with Bernard Cribbins?
Yeah, my dad wrote a song called "Old Tom's Boat" because I'm involved with a lot of music, and yeah, so I put music to those words, and we came up with a song called "Old Tom's Boat," which was on CBeebies a long, long time ago. That I performed with a small animation, and Poi kept saying, "Oh, that song, Bruno, her little boy, loves it and keeps singing it, and there's a program there." And we started talking, and when we were on the road, because we used to travel all the time for hours and hours, getting to different theaters, and we came up with the idea of this old fisherman. I'd worked with Bernard Cribbins in Panto, and we were friends. And I said we should come up with something for Bernard, this old fisherman character. And it evolved. There was already a program with Tom. Tifu Tom was on, and so we changed the name to Jack. And also Bernard Cribbins was in Carry On Jack, and which one of his favorite carry-ons. So we went with Jack. It seemed like a good name, and yeah, and now there have been several histories, quite a few, been a lot of episodes of Old Jack's Boat and Rockpool Tales, which was a follow-on, and yeah, it's done really, really well, and it's won a lot of awards too.
Great. And I have to say, I might be biased, but changing the name to Jack, stroke of genius. I think what I like about yourself is that a lot of people go into kids' TV as like a gateway into going into more grown-up roles, like it's just a year or two, just to get through it. But with yourself, you just want to stay in children's television. You've got such a passion for it as well, and I think that's really, really fantastic.
Yeah, my passion really is for family entertainment, and you get that in the theatre with a good pantomime. A terrible pantomime is horrendous, and it puts people off ever going again. And quite often, when you meet someone who says, "Oh, I can't stand pantomime," it's because they've seen a bad one. They've seen the vicar make a fool of himself, or they've just been to a bad panto. And do you know what? Some of the ones I've been have been terrible, and I hold my hand up. It's going to happen. I've been in a few really very, very good ones. I was in one in Richmond, Cinderella, with Haley Mills and Matthew Kelly and his son, and an incredible cast where everything came together. It was $1 million, and it had a huge budget and great spectacle. And I challenge anyone who went to see that show not to have loved it, and to have always wanted to go to a panto ever since. And I think good children's television does the same. It entertains in a way that means that you can't help yourself but laugh or enjoy it, and want it to always, take Rent a Ghost, which I mentioned earlier on as being one of my favorite programs. It was just so funny and joyful, and even when it wasn't funny, it made you happy. And I think that that's what I love about the entertainment that I'm involved with, and the people that I work with. They're all working together to make happy, feel good entertainment, and that's all I've ever wanted to do. I despair a little bit about some of the entertainment on adult television, on grown-up television, because I think it has forgotten to be warm and friendly and family orientated. It's not all of it, but there's so much, not aggression but worthiness, and just relax. And when the lockdown happened, where were the sitcoms? They could have just run a load of old sitcoms and made everybody happy. Why give us boring stuff and tragedy, and there's enough of it going on in real life. We need to have, but in children's television, it is a bit like the Truman Show. everything is lovely, and the flowers never die.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's why so many of us look back on it so much, especially when we're having a bad day. Sometimes it's nice to just look back on something and, remind yourself of more better times. And I agree, yeah, they should have shown more of the old classics during that time. So, yeah, so to kind of wrap things up, what are you up to these days?
Well, as I said, the TV business is not in a great state because of COVID, but I have managed to film a few things. We did a series of stargazing at the end of last year, and we've just finished. Well, it was a while ago now, a few weeks ago. Feels like yesterday. We filmed Romeo and Juliet for CBeebies, which was amazing, but it's just not easy to film at the moment with all the social distancing, and it's just a lot, costs a lot more money, which is then, it's not wasted obviously because you're keeping people safe, but it's a necessary thing and it takes a lot of money out of the budget. So while that's going on, I've been making a lot of radio. I've made a series called The Magic Den. We've just done the second series for BBC Sounds and CBeebies Radio with Stuffy from Show Me, and some amazing celebrity guests, including Derek Griffiths, who was a superstar of my childhood, and Sue Pollard, Michael Rosen. And I'd love you to listen. Please tell all your listeners to listen to The Magic Den, because it took a lot of time to make. That's what I did during lockdown. And right now I'm writing a panto for Pool in Dorset. And I'm going to be Dame for the first time on a stage, in a theatre show. I have done it on television, but never done it before in a professional long-running pantomime in a theatre. So that's exciting.
Great stuff. It's nice that you keep him busy. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but you run a children's radio station as well called Little Radio.
Yes. So, with some friends and colleagues from my LBC days, we've started a children's radio station called Little Radio that's running 24/7. It uses a lot of, thanks to all my friends on the BBC, Andy Day, Kat Sandian, Poi Fan Lee, Naomi Wilkinson, all these, and Dave Benson Phillips have all been incredibly generous with their time, because it really is, there's no funding. It's just a filtered music station with a lot of familiar voices on it, bedtime stories, but during the day it's back-to-back children's songs, nursery rhymes.
Well, Chris, it's been a delight chatting with you today. Thank you for taking so much time out to speak to me and reminiscing. It's been great fun.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for, keeping the candle burning, for children's TV, because, things do move on, and there's a sense of it being a little bit like wallpaper, that you produce all this stuff and then it's forgotten, and people forget it's there. But, a lot of it is still in existence on YouTube, a lot of old programs, and it just adds to the choice, isn't it? And they were happy days to be involved with, and I'm glad you've got happy memories too of watching them. I certainly have, of all the programs that I used to watch. And every now and again, if you're feeling a bit lonely or low, it's worth putting one on. I've quite often watched an old Rent-A-Ghost or Chigley to cheer myself up.
Yes, I do the same with shows from my era all the time. Yes, and sometimes even Jungle Run or maybe Playdays. Well, Chris, it's been lovely chatting to you. Thank you. A massive thank you to Chris for sharing his memories. And if you want to find out more about what he's up to, follow him on Twitter at Real Chris Jarvis. That's it from me for now, but I will be back with one final episode for this series in the next few weeks. Until then, I'll see you soon.